Hello and welcome to another episode of the Manufacturing Leaders Podcast with me, Mark Bracknell, Managing Director of Theo James Recruitment. On today's episode, we welcome Tim Williams, the co-founder of Go Geothermal based in Newton Aycliffe. I couldn't wait to interview Tim. I had the absolute pleasure of sharing the podcast stage with him recently on another podcast, and I knew I wanted him on my show, and he was excellent. There was so much in this episode we talked about. Go Geothermal specialise in ground and heat pumps, and we talked about that in detail, both educationally. So you're going to learn a lot about that subject because it's very, very important. Also, the sustainability in renewables in its entirety, but also how businesses and also people domestically can help to save money and use grants. So this is an episode you're going to learn a lot about the subject, which is really important, a lot of lessons to be learned, but we're also talking in depth about the core of this podcast, which is obviously management. I learn a lot about what makes a good leader, the humility side, delegation side. We talk in detail about the early years of Go Geothermal. Tim told some great funny stories about those early days and the lessons to be learned as well, and just everything along the way. So this was a real enjoyable episode, probably one of my favourite MD episodes of all time, and one I know you're going to learn a lot from. So please sit back and watch or listen, however you like to do so, and please like and subscribe to the show. It really means a lot and it helps me get even better guests on the show. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the episode. Excellent. So a warm welcome, Tim. As I said, I'll go straight into this podcast. Same question I ask every single person at the start of the episode. What does being a leader mean to you?
Morning, Mark. Thanks for having me on. I think being a leader means many things to many people, I guess, whether you're being led or you're a leader yourself. And I've had some time to think about it, as all your guests have. And I suppose where I've got to with it is, I think first and foremost, being a leader is it's vital to inspire and absolutely create a winning culture, whether that be in a sport or be in a business. In my case, I think it's very important to be inspirational to the team around you. And when I say inspire, I mean give people something to aim for. It's very, very broad brush, but it's important in the culture of a business. I think one of the other things that gets overlooked is, and certainly like a lot of people in business, you don't start with a team around you. You start from humble beginnings, and that was very much the case for myself and Sean. Being a leader wasn't even on our radar because we weren't leading anyone. It was us. So as you get into the journey and you have a degree of success and you're lucky enough to have people working for you and around you, I think one of the things I've come to realise, painfully, I would admit, that often your best employees are the ones that, as you see it, cause you the most tests. And I've learned, if I'm honest, the hard way that you need to be pushed, and good people are your business, and the ones that are the most capable and most gifted are often the ones that push you the most in terms of testing yourself, and they will question your ideas, your thoughts, not necessarily in a negative way, but it will test your resilience as a leader and your confidence in your plan. And that's something I think I would definitely tell people who are in this journey or going forward who hope to be successful. It's very important once you've got good people in to listen to them and not always agree. Or, sometimes you can be clever about how you adapt their good ideas. You can make a bit of fun about it if, full well at a meeting it's somebody else's idea. You should never, ever not give them the praise and credit for their ideas. But I think how you model it into your business is really important. So, yeah, that's been amongst many surprises. That's been a big surprise, how important that is, having had time to lead people. And I think also, this is debatable, but for me, one of the most crucial things about being a leader of any organization is to never be satisfied, always be wanting the next thing, never be afraid of evolving. It's an uncomfortable place to be a leader. And if it's not uncomfortable, you're not doing your job well. You need to be constantly paranoid, constantly thinking, how can I change this? How can I evolve it? And it's a very unsettling place. If you want comfort and a more of the same scenario in a work role, you're definitely not a leader.
Yeah.
They're the main points. And then the last one, I think, which is arguably one of the hardest, because the fine line we all battle when we're leading is confidence. But I think humility is massively underrated within a business. I think people feed off the personalities of leaders, and if they don't see them as having a sensible level of humility and humbleness, despite whatever they've achieved. I mean, obviously, there are people that have achieved enormous success on a stratospheric level, and keeping that humility when there's so much pressure to change that are subtle and not obvious. It's very, very important to remind yourself that, you're just a person as you were at the start, and you should stay like that. So humility is a big one that is very, very important to keep.
Love that. I completely agree. That humility piece for you, has that mindset changed over time? Because you'll be a very different leader today than you were when you first started taking on people. And sometimes people struggle, young leaders, new leaders, with that. I have to be a certain character, and then they potentially come to realize that I actually need to be myself, and people need to see that. Did you go through that transition yourself? Would you say?
I think everybody wrestles with being, a leader of people as the team changes. Obviously, there's more of them. If you have any success, different people come in, different blends of characters that you're not used to dealing with. And I think other people have to answer whether I changed. I think I definitely haven't changed as a person, my core values. You have to change some of your weaknesses that inherently are with you, as they are with everybody, to adapt into your role. So your core personality doesn't change, and you have to be genuine. People see straight through it if you're anybody else, but you have to adapt in a work environment some of those weaknesses that may be detrimental to the business. I mean, I can give you examples of that, but it's a fine line between being yourself, being honest. You have to show vulnerabilities, but not a weakness in your leadership role.
Yeah, that's the difference. I completely agree.
So yeah, people do struggle with it. I think when you're younger, it's even harder, because when we're younger, obviously we're not the finished article. If you think, I always think about being in your 20s and your 30s as being like a brand new racing car that hasn't yet been refined. You're incredible, and you'll never be that fast again, but you haven't had the refinements, and that's a massive bonus when you start in a business. But it's also something that will lead to challenges, because you're like that get refined as you get. I mean, basically, as you get older, you just get far better at doing a lot with less. How I look at it.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. The vision one's interesting because everyone starts a business for different reasons. Whether that's an opportunity that presents itself, or whether that's something they want to be. The vision you mentioned there, when it was just you and Sean, it's a very different thing, because you're not needing to motivate or lead anyone, and that vision might not necessarily have been as important as it was then as it was now. But however, your business is one that has real purpose, so it could be very different for you than it would be for me to say, as an owner of a recruitment firm. Yeah. As that again, was there almost a time where you went, we've got a team now, we need to have vision, or is it the same vision that's carried through from day one, would you say?
I think that, well, again, a very difficult question to answer, but a valid one. When you start with an idea and an embryo of a business, you're so lost and driven and just completely absorbed in the end goal of success that, if you're honest, you don't even give a second thought to bringing people in. And then when it happens, it kind of happens because it's a necessity to actually cope with the business growth. Once you've kind of had 5 years of bringing people in and you reflect back, that's when you start to have a light bulb moment and go, hang on a minute, are we actually using the team around us to the best of our abilities? And that's something that I've personally struggled with, because back to your original point, when I got into business, it was nothing to do with having a team around me. It was very single-minded, and it didn't involve other people, even though I was sensible enough to realize that nobody has success in most businesses on their own. And, Amazon wouldn't be quite what it was without the people around him. There's a limit to what one human being can do. So it's kind of obvious you're going to have to do it, but you don't focus on it at the start.
Yeah. And Go Geothermal, brilliant business, and probably at its most exciting time at the moment, obviously, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah, unique times, yeah.
Yeah, and nearly 15 years, obviously, since the start. I'm sure a lot has changed. I'd love to go back briefly to that. So, what led you to starting that business? Was that something you'd always planned? Was it an opportunity? How did it come about?
From a business perspective, I'd always, since being a teenager at school, I'd always been obsessed with business and wanting to have my own business. And at the time, I don't think I really knew why I wanted a business, but I knew I did. And I genuinely can't put it down to anything other than I always loved the idea of getting something and selling it. And I knew early on I was very natural at that selling role. I like people. I like being around people. And I think, daft as it sounds, I remember going to an afternoon once at a local windmill where I was brought up, where they were selling bags of flour, obviously. And I was invited by a friend who said, look, will you come down and help? And I was going to be lifting things and doing things. And there was an old guy selling flour, and they were bringing lots of people through who were visiting the windmill. And I was thinking, he's not very good at that. So I said, can I have a go? And he was quite clever, because he said, yeah, you have a go then if you think you're good at it. Anyway, I got involved in it, and I was quite good at it. And I knew that I wanted to do something like that, but that kind of cemented the fact that if you deal with people in a certain way, even greet them as they walk through into the shop, that elicits a different outcome. And I like the fact that, how do you judge a person? And the more standoffish they were, and the more resistant they were to actually buy something in that windmill, I thought, well, let's see what is going to get their attention. And even then, I knew that I could do that. And I thought, well, if I can do that, it doesn't matter what it is, as long as I know how to do that. I can create an environment where people will want to engage with what I'm talking about, whether it be, a bag of flour, or whether it be a car or an aeroplane, whatever it is. And I didn't know at that point it was going to be in renewable heating. I mean, moving a little bit on, I was always very interested in the environment, even back in the 80s. I do like technology mixing with what science can do. And I'm not scientific or gifted scientifically or in any of those sort of useful professions, but I knew I could relate to different people at a high level, a low level, in terms of knowledge, and right through to everything in between. I just because I'm not trying at it, it's quite natural for me for whatever reason. That's something I'm gifted with. That's probably my gift that we're all given at birth. We've all got different gifts, haven't we?
Do you think for you that's almost like a curiosity about the psychology of people? Because you're talking about,
sure, I'm sure it is. Yeah, I'm sure that's what I mean. My parents were both not from a business background, were very much involved with helping people, and I think a lot of it probably subconsciously rubbed off. Although I'm very different to my parents in lots of ways, that definitely rubbed off. And of course, when you're younger, you don't realize that those things will help you in later life, because every situation, whatever your career or path, you are going to be dealing with people.
Yeah, 100%. How does that impact you positively and negatively regarding when you're in your own business in terms of dealing with people? I guess a lot of that for you is relying on your own internal mechanism to the psychology piece, in terms of can they work for my business? Are they going to be right? Is this someone I want to do business with? Is that something you're always considering, or less so than the data analytical piece, would you say?
Yeah, I think well, three parts to that. In terms of customers or people I work with, or the data, I'm a Virgo, and whilst I'm not into the star signs, Virgos are very analytical by nature, to our positive and our detriment. So I am quite interested in the numbers. That's true. In terms of customers, I have had a very black and white approach to customers and suppliers of the business since we started. Really, my view is very much, if people have got the same value set and ethos of how to do business, you will quickly form a natural bond with them anyway. And what you learn, probably a bit slowly, is that if you try and put too much resource and effort of your own time into customers that will never see things your way, you're basically wasting time that could be spent far more productively over here. And it's a very hard thing to walk away, especially when you're selling things. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. And you automatically go into the human emotion of, oh, I failed because, Joe Bloggs doesn't want to deal with me, but they will deal with that customer over there. Well, sometimes it's just because Joe Bloggs gets on really well with that person over there. It's not a negative in you. Sometimes it's because you do something that really irritates them, and that that's you, and you're not going to win. So go and spend your time over here where somebody does like you, and you will win. And that's the lesson I learned in the first sort of 3 or 4 years, particularly. I'd already got a lot of those things formed by working for other people anyway, so I'd learn on their time, if you like. But that gets harder as you mature into a business, because obviously the opportunities get greater. You're more critical of yourself because you're more of a rounded individual, and you're more down your journey. So you think better, you push yourself harder. You're less forgiving of yourself. So that gets even harder, but you have to come back to ground zero and go, hang on, what did you learn at the start? And it's still applicable. Don't try and change a scenario that will never change because you don't meet in the middle. And ethoses matter with businesses. If you look at any business, I would challenge you to find a business that doesn't have a spider's web overlap in their ethos. When they buy from a company a lot, you'll always see an overlap either in the management or the people that work there. You very rarely see total opposites working together on a weekly basis because they won't gel, and it always comes back to people again.
And 100%, I completely agree. And that comes down to your values within the business. Is that a piece that you've looked at as a business? What are our values? Do we hire against that? Do we work with people within that? Is that something conscious or more subconscious for you?
Well, I think if I'm brutally honest about this journey I've been on, where I undoubtedly, and also Sean, my co-founder, had lots of skills and passion, where we've had to learn from others, and definitely had to learn from others in the last 5 years, is when you're managing a team of people, the skills that are required are very, very different. I would openly say my natural skill set is not managing and getting the best out of people. I've worked for enough people to know there's a lot better people than myself. I know my skills, I know my strengths, and it isn't necessarily getting the best out of individuals. Where I do think I'm capable is I'm good at appreciating good managers. I understand when people are good at their roles, and I think I've got far better in the last couple of years at letting that control of how the teams are managed go to other people who are better at it. We've undergone a lot of changes in the last 12 months as a business, partly because of this. And I'm sure a lot of businesses that start with 1 or 2 people learn the hard way, as we did, that what works when you're turning over £1 million or less doesn't work when you're sort of growing exponentially and you've got 20, 25 people. It's not the same cultures, and you have to evolve. Like I was saying earlier, you do have to evolve. Now, we have been smart enough to evolve, but that, again, back to your original question, I just think sometimes you have to know your limitations in business as well, and bring that skill set in. You can't always change to what you need to be.
100%. You know what? I've quite recently come to that realization, exactly what you just said there, and it's really empowering. I've came to the same realization that what are my strengths? Because I think when you start a business, you do everything, and you have to do everything.
You have to.
You have to. You got no option, and then you almost organically become a bit of a jack of all trades, and then you start to hire people, you start to delegate, but you still probably keep hold of things you think you should keep hold of because your title is MD, director, whatever it is. But the minute you give responsibility to someone and you see them do it better than you, and then you realize that that's okay because you're doing something else which is better your skill set. It's such an empowering feeling. I'm quite recently into that.
It's like a millstone, literally like a millstone coming off your neck. Because take your example, you maybe give a role to take care of an area in your business, and you think no one else can do it like me, and that's true, they can't. But here's the thing: sometimes they come in and they do it better than you.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's empowering. I agree, because you realise that by letting a pressure go from your sort of work desk, you've actually made the business better, and you've lowered your workload so you can focus on something else. So
Exactly
fantastic
that.
when it happens.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people can learn from that, even if you put into leadership roles, it doesn't mean you need to do everything. Do you know what I mean? It might mean that you just need to delegate better and play to your strengths and, not always practice your weaknesses. I think I found that trap as well. Just, I'm not good at this, so I must practice. But actually, sometimes just accept it and just keep honing on your skill set and do what you're
Yeah,
good at. Yeah, completely.
definitely.
I'd like to briefly go back to when you first started those 15 years ago, because I think it's sometimes quite nice to reflect. And what was it? Just fly from seat to pan stuff? Was it good? Did you have a plan? What was it like? Was it just you and Sean just first year?
Well, it was from an embryo of an idea from myself. I kind of had literally one of those moments in life where I was working in a role on the road, driving around looking for opportunities, and I was very much the junior in that team in the pipeline industry. And I think I took apologies to you, Mark. I think you've had to hear this story before, but yeah, I was driving around one wet Monday morning. I got called into a customer that we didn't yet have, asking me to. Well, basically, I sat down and the guy says, "Look, I want to buy some of those." And he pointed at this pallet, and it was full of these black pipes. Nothing strange about that. We sold polyethylene pipe work. I said, well, what is it? I've never seen pipe in that orientation. He says, well, you put it down a hole, and you put cold fluid through it, and you can heat your building from it and cool your building from it. I says, say that again. Anyway, a big conversation ensued of an hour and a half. Again, playing to my strength of being interested and liking talking to people. And luckily for me, the gentleman was very chatty. And I said, look, I don't know if we can get these for you, but we certainly make polyethylene. Leave it with me. And I literally remember driving out of that yard where he had his drilling rigs, thinking, that is a business. That is going to be a business. And I knew I always wanted to be a business since I was in business and from a teenager, and I had this passion, as I said. So, but I'd always wanted the idea, and it was like I can't explain it. It was like a higher power just planted this thing in front of me and said that is going to be a business. And I just knew then. It was like this overwhelming sense of I found it. Anyway, that was the easy bit. The next bit was in the early days of the internet. It was kind of 2003, 2004 time, and I was looking around saying, does anybody else do this product? And there were companies in sort of the Nordics that were selling bits and bats, and I thought, yeah, okay, we'll have a look at this. And a few months elapsed. I thought, right, I've definitely got something here. I know this is going to happen. But I was having a chat with Sean, my now business partner, and we were up in his house at Sedgefield at the time. And we were literally chatting over it as friends do over a beer. And he said, look, this is my idea. What do you think to it? I said, I think it's got legs, this idea. He says, and he just instantly said, yeah, that's a great idea. And literally from that, we just said, right, well, let's do it. Let's go for it. And the thing that he doesn't realise was more important, it wasn't the fact that he could bring an element of finance to it, because relatively it was a low amount and we didn't invest in the right things anyway, as it turned out. It was his belief to come into it and work at it and self-assuredness. That was the important thing. Yeah. And then the two of us got together, and then it was a very, it literally, we formed in October 2006 officially, but it was a very, very slow start. We put the slow in slow start, and the industry was very immature, and we found out quickly that the idea was good, but yeah, the timing, and as you know in business, timing's important. Yeah, it was quite early.
Yeah, and do you find, because now everyone's talking about renewable, sustainability, efficiency, all this type of stuff. But that feels quite recent, very recent to some extent. But that won't have felt recent for you because obviously you've been in this world for so long. What do you think's been the transition between people changing their mindset about this versus 10, 12 years ago, where I imagine there's no education behind it at all?
No, I think especially if I take it to the UK, I mean, the journey the UK has made is incredible when you actually sit back and look at it, which I rarely do, to be honest. I should do more, but I think the only thing I can remember around the time we were setting this up was swampy and looking after trees and changing himself. There was a little bit of a movement at the time where they got a lot of coverage, and people were like, "Well, what are you doing? Tree huggers? What are you playing at?" And then over the kind of sort of certainly 2010 onwards, there were a number of government initiatives driven by the science, but also the politics, but also a kind of a real realization from the scientific community, if you like, that was getting good coverage from David Attenborough. Again, it always takes the media. to sort of put it in front of the general public. And I think a lot of people started to slowly but surely wake up to the fact that we can't just keep doing more of the same as a world and not expect some damage to be caused. And whilst there was definitely as much anti-climate change, as in, no, it's always happened, the climate's always changed and there's always been this and there's always been that. Once the science got to a point where it was irrefutable to most reasonable people, that's when a lot more media came in, a lot more politicians came in on the bandwagon. And then a number of things kind of gained momentum. But they were slow and subtle. These things never come at once from one area. It was lots of little stakeholders, such as David Attenborough with his TV shows, such as, as I've said before, the Greta Thunberg effect later on. It just takes these quite seminal moments where it changes everything, and then they all link up. And that, I think, then when you combine it with some of the extreme weather we've experienced in Europe and further afield, again over the last 10 years, people have joined the dots up. The general public are not daft. The thing about the general public is we're all trying to get on and do our bit and live day to day. But sometimes, if enough comes in front of the general public that's kind of grabbing their attention, they start listening. It's, everybody wants to do the right thing and everybody wants to live a better life, but you're lost in day-to-day life a lot of the time. So it takes big events sometimes to draw the attention in.
Apologies for interrupting this podcast for a very quick 30-second pitch of my business. Theo James are a specialist manufacturing and engineering recruitment search firm based in Seaham in the Northeast. If you're looking for any staff or a new opportunity yourself, from a semi-skilled level right the way up to C-suite executive, then please get in touch. We have a specialist consultant in each discipline ready to help. I'm extremely proud of what we've built over the years, and I'd love to extend that service out to you. Thank you. Enjoy the podcast. Yeah, 100%. I think if you look at the average Joe, or even the average business, a lot of people want to do what's right and want to do what's right in the environment, but sometimes there has to be a catalyst of change financially in that sense. So I think the advantage you got there is as well that a lot of companies and people will start to realise that you help the environment, but you're also helping their pockets in the long term, because obviously everything, energy, etc., is getting very expensive. So do you think can you almost pinpoint a time in the business, even though it's been quite subtle changes, where there was almost like a step change to go, right, we're on a bit of a journey. I can see this trajectory is now accelerating quicker than it has been for the last 6-7 years.
I suppose it's different for everybody in this industry, but one of the things that from our side, particularly with our customer base at that time, I think where I kind of realised, I know I realised because I celebrated the moment on a personal level, which a lot of people should do more when they've got their own businesses. You're very good at not marking your milestones when you do have some success. And myself and Sean have been very poor at it, if we're honest. But I remember when the domestic renewable heat incentive was announced, which effectively was by far the most generous that had ever been launched in the Western world or anywhere in the world. And it was going to give huge amounts of money to homeowners to put that technology in. That was a game changer for our business, because we were very domestically focused at the time in particular. And when you were looking at a market that was suddenly going to go to a homeowner, right, well, you could put that oil or gas boiler in, or you could earn the best part of £35,000 over 7 years doing something different. And as you'd expect me to say, it rocket fueled the industry for lots of people, not just us, obviously. And it made a huge difference to the industry. And it meant investment then started to come and confidence started to come. So that was around sort of 2011 time, that sort of area. Don't quote me on that, but it was a huge, it was a bit later, but it was a big turning point for us. So yeah, I can remember that. And then lots of things happened in succession after that.
But for those people, and I'm still thinking there'll be a lot of them, and I was one, who have little to no knowledge of what heat source ground, but all that good stuff does in the business, because I still think there's an education piece, which hopefully in this podcast we can do. How would you describe what they do and the benefits Apologies for asking you a picture. You said you were
Well,
salesman.
heat pumps, when we formed, it was very much oriented towards ground source heat pumps, not air source heat pumps. And of course, we do both now. An air source, from a volume point of view, is overwhelmingly going to dominate Europe in terms of sales of heat pumps, just because they're so applicable to many more situations. Air source, and they are, capital outlay wise, they are lower capital outlay. That's just the facts, unfortunately. Whether I'm a purist of ground source, but I like both technologies. But yeah, that's the facts of the matter. But I mean, to anybody that's never come across a heat pump or how they work, the analogy that gets rolled out a lot is the fridge freezer. Most people have a fridge or a fridge freezer at home, and it's literally that technology in reverse. You put your hand at the back of a fridge freezer, it's very hot. Again, it's the same technology. It's using latent heat that's from the sun, whether it be in the air, whether it be in the ground, whether it be in water. And we can, using gases and compression and expansion, we can use refrigerants, natural refrigerants, man-made refrigerants. We can, latterly, it's been much more natural refrigerants because of their lower global warming potential. We can take that latent heat, which is there free, which is recharged every day through rainfall or from the sunshine, and we take a very low grade heat using science and take it to a higher grade heat within your home using that heat pump, which essentially is compressing and expanding that heat and making it hotter at the point of delivery when it comes into your house. So again, a very crude analogy. You get a bike pump and you put your finger at the end of an old-fashioned bike pump. It gets hot. It's compressing. So it's a mixture. It's a very old science. It's been around for hundreds of years. All that's changed is the technology, as science has moved on, has got better and better and better.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I find quite nice is that when we had very early days heat pumps, they were using natural refrigerants because they didn't have man-made refrigerants. And now we've gone full circle again, and we're going back to natural refrigerants because they're far less damaging to the environment. So it's an interesting cycle we've gone round. But of course, the technology bears no relation in terms of how sophisticated it is now, but it is the same science.
Yeah.
Ground source, you put a low temperature fluid through your garden, and because of the rule of physics, it will actually pick up that heat as it goes around the garden, because heat is drawn to coolth. That then comes back into your heat pump. It's elevated even more from that low temperature pickup to a useful heat at, say, 30, 35 degrees upwards, right through to showers at 40, 45 degrees or 50 degrees, depending if you're a lady.
Yeah.
Not really. They do. Ladies do tend to like the showers hotter, I find. So it's really, really clever, but it's not new technology. It's just it needed the landscape around it to come away from fossil technology because of the damage it did.
Yeah.
I mean, if people want to go into the real science of it, there's lots of good little videos that link off our website, the gogeothermal.co.uk, and there's also lots of good YouTube clips out there that will show it in graphic. I mean, I find it much easier to look at a graphic where it shows what each gas is doing in each stage and compressors, and there's lots of ways to explain it, but that's essentially what it's doing. It's solar energy being utilized.
And if a manufacturing firm or a commercial builder, for example, use that technology, then it's obvious they would also save financially on the energy side. Would you say? Is that
totally? I mean, I think one of the most exciting things and the things to remember is that with a heat pump, if you take a commercial gas boiler or a gas boiler in your home and you put a kilowatt of grid energy into that, so 1 kilowatt in, you are going to get typically less than 1 kilowatt of useful heat out. So that's where you get your 100% efficiency upwards. So you got 1 kilowatt going into your boiler. Even on a brand new state-of-the-art boiler from day one, when it's running very efficiently, you might get 95%, even less, back out of it. You take a heat pump and put a kilowatt of energy in, even a sort of a lower performing one in air source, you're going to be getting 200%, 300%, right up to 500% efficiency, depending on the weather, depending on what's happening, what temperature it's going out of. I mean, it's important to differentiate efficiencies with what's called a SCOP, a seasonal coefficient of performance. That's where it goes throughout a whole year. So you've got heating seasons and summer weather in there. So it looks at the whole heating season throughout an entire year. So I'm trying not to get too into the technical side of it, but one thing I can tell you very definitely is, if you buy any brand of heat pump, obviously I'm brand biased to my brands, but you will be putting in something far, far more efficient. It will have anywhere between 200 to 500% efficiencies from day one, and that will not drop off significantly through the life of that heat pump. It'll alter depending on all sorts of conditions and weather, but it'll never drop below a certain level. Far, far more efficient. And one of the nice things about the technology is if you put it in a factory, for example, and factories often create heat or some kind of byproduct. So many examples I can give you where you take that wasted byproduct or heat, like a water that's used to cool something, and then it's taken away. We can put our heat exchangers in that water, take that wasted heat and put it back into your heating system. So what was once wasted using fossil technology, so using gas to heat up some water or to just some water that was used as a cooling bath, we can then take that heat and put it into our heating system. So you're then using what was wasted as a useful source of hot water or heating. And that can be done on a massive scale right down to a relatively small scale. It's got so much sort of adaptability. And I think cooling's the big one that everyone's seeing now. Over the last few years, cooling's become so important. I mean, look at the southeast of England in the summer. I mean, last year here in Nottinghamshire, we had 40 degrees. That cooling potential on the heat pumps that we've got, where you can get a passive cooling and active cooling on heat pumps, it's so underrated. You can't do that with gas boilers.
Yeah.
You know, this is a huge advantage. So there are so many areas we can help businesses and homeowners that they won't have foreseen. And you know, the technology within a heat pump controls compared to a normal boiler, it's on another level what it can do. So there's lots of subtle differences that are not so well known.
It's fascinating, and it's obviously an absolute no-brainer for particularly manufacturing firms as well, who have got a lot of them have got targets to meet by times.
Lots of grants available now, and lots of incentives, which obviously, if they want to reach out to our business, we can put them in touch with those agencies that have got the monies available.
Yeah, I love that. Excellent stuff. And I'll put your details on the back of this. I think this all links nicely as well with what we kind of touched on a little while ago with the purpose of a business, and actually whether, the purpose of your business is brilliant. And imagine when you are hiring people, then it's a great thing to sell because they're part of something which is a real movement and change. But actually, if you work for a manufacturing or engineering company or any form of company which has this type of technology in, then I think companies are missing a trick not selling that as part of their business, because we've spoken before about it, and you mentioned Greta Thunberg, those sort of people who probably when she first came out was almost a bit of a who's this? She was a bit of a joke, but actually the movement she's created, and people underestimate the power that she's given a generation of people younger than us who actually really care. Don't sort of pretend to care. They actually really care about this sort of stuff, which is brilliant, and it means that there will be some actual change. I think generations, after, before that, probably were just too late down the line to really, really, truly care en masse. But I think companies have got an opportunity to sell that purpose. Is that something you think about when you're hiring? That sort of vision. Do people bought into that?
I think your point's very, very valid in terms of the generation now are far more of Greta Thunberg's age, definitely, and younger, are far more engaged with what's happening in the environment. Apart from the obvious, they need to care because they're going to be around a lot longer than us. I think they are just genuinely much more engaged with what's happening worldwide with the environment than we were, perhaps. Yeah. So that really fuels the movement, definitely. And I think governments and political parties, ignore that at their peril, definitely. I mean, you've only got to look at what the what Labour are doing in opposition to be, they're very focused in a way that no other previous opposition party have looked at the environment. That's not an accident. They know that there's a lot of votes there, and also it's so high up the political agenda for all parties now. You cannot ignore it. So it's that definitely helps. When I'm looking at bringing people into the business, I think I'm lucky in that we can sell the feel-good factor very easily because, we're not selling cigarettes or something harming. We're selling something that's taking carbon out of the atmosphere and is making the world a better place. So it's very good to have that when you're selling the dream. I think of it more, if I'm honest, as a business owner, in terms of there's huge amounts of industry and business in the UK that profess to be very environmentally focused. And you can read their corporate mission statements. And I'm cynical by nature, but I'm also getting on a bit now, so I'm even more cynical. And I'm always interested to see what businesses actually invest in these mission statements and corporate statements. As in, if I look behind their marketing and go, right, okay, then, well, so you've got 11 factories in the UK. How many of those have you looked to be costed out to switch? And how many have you actually changed? And what have you actually done to actually even cost them out? And that's a very interesting practical thing that we can all do when we buy things. And I would urge all people to do that when they're buying products day to day, especially your daily products. If you're buying a particular deodorant every day, have a look behind and see what those companies are actually doing. Don't look at their marketing, look at what they're doing. It's very easy to find that information out with the internet. And it's quite interesting to see who's doing something and who's talking about it. And that, as you rightly hint at, Mark, is what affects change. I've, in a good way, I've seen a lot of companies want to do the right thing now, and they want to engage with industry in the renewable sector to see how they can improve, which is very encouraging, and it's the right thing. But government, I'd still say we've got a way to go. Government sticks as opposed to carrots. And I only have to look to next year with the new build and what legislation's coming in. Regrettably, business, and all business is bottom line focused. I understand how the world works, of course I do. But business sometimes needs a little bit of a kick as well as a help. And I think there's a lot of help out there now. But sometimes I'm a bit frustrated with big business and small business that sometimes you have to lead a little and go, right, rather than wait for this incentive or wait for this stick, let's come out of our pack and go, let's be the first chocolate bar manufacturer to do this, or let's be the first deodorant company to do this, rather than wait until they have to or be scared to. And there's too much of that in business. And I think that's something that Greta Thunberg, again, we're mentioning her, she's been very clever in the fact that she's allied herself to certain corporate businesses who've been very clever themselves to go, right, we like what you're saying, we'll get on board that. Because there's a lot of business to be won by those businesses if they get on board the green agenda. And I'm not talking greenwashing, I'm talking practical steps to change their infrastructure. That's where we can all improve. I'm certainly not holding us up as the Holy Grail. We've got electric cars, we've got a lot more electric cars than we ever had. They're expensive. They're more expensive to run if you don't charge them, at home or at base, but you have to practice a little bit about what you preach. So it's what we can all do day to day. And I'd urge all business leaders particularly to put pressure on their middle management to go out and see what they can do to make the companies more efficient, where they can make savings. But imagine what the marketing can do on social media once they've made those changes. You only have to do a little bit, and it's great. It's great PR. Just do something genuine and get great, genuine PR from it.
Yeah, love it. Excellent stuff. That's a great way of putting it. I normally have a guest question this stage, but I forgot to get it, which I do sometimes. So I'll get you out of this. However, I like to, the curiosity's got me here. Now, when we spoke before this podcast, there was a couple of things you asked me to ask you. So I like to pick one of these. You can pick which one, which could be a good story to tell. I've got Hamilton story, lorry driver, cafes and meeting point, or credit cards. So what we having?
Yes.
You did.
Well, when you had a little bit of a chat about the podcast before, I thought some things that might be a little bit light-hearted interest, really. Yeah, I mean, on a journey when you set a business up from scratch, there's a number of things that happen that when you look back, are quite funny, really. But one of the ones that certainly happened to myself and Sean was that when you start a business, you're always trying to put an image out there that you're bigger than you are, because you're rightly paranoid that who's going to deal with a tin pot little company that's running from a front bedroom with nothing behind them. Everyone has to start somewhere, and there has to be a bit of creativity at that point. Now, one of the things we used to do in the early days was, mainly because we had nowhere to meet anyone, but when we started to get a little bit of interest from big suppliers, we were very mindful that we couldn't bring them to a front bedroom of a domestic house and go, oh, of course we're serious, we're the real deal, we're going places. So one of the things we used to do, and this is a little tip for people who are starting up, is we used to quite often create the image that we'll meet you in a local cafe because it'd just be nice to get out the office. It's crazy at the moment, we just can't hear ourselves think. So that probably went on for about 18 months when actually there was tumbleweed blowing across the office and the phone never rang. So that's one little tip I've got. And interesting, suppliers quite liked it because they were used to having sterile meetings in offices, so it worked in a way we didn't foresee really. So that was one. The other one was when you're trying to be too clever for your own good, and we used to make, I think from memory it was, I think we'd called it something like Farfield Towers or something. We'd come up with, we'd mix the address up of our home business enough so it looked like a real business, but it wasn't so much that the postman couldn't find it. And of course, what we hadn't legislated for was when we started ordering things, not everything in daily life goes, perfectly. And when we were ordering things it was actually from Germany, because their market was a lot more mature, and so a lot of products had to come from Germany at the time. Still do, in fairness, but we put a delivery on, and we hadn't really thought about the fact that we might be ordering a couple of boxes or something, but other people were ordering other things in other markets on 40-foot lorries. So, of course, one day was, getting up and everything was fine. And I wasn't there at the time, but Sean was sort of holding the fort. And he was looking out of his window, this big 40-foot trailer pulls out. And before he knows it, there's a guy pulling a high-ab off the back, and he's driving up his driveway. And obviously the neighbours are thinking, what's going on here? Having told them we're not running a business from there. But these are the little adventures. But I think my favourite one was, I told you about the Hamilton one. When we were so lost in the early days in building the business up, and you get phone calls like you don't now, but from members of the public who were pioneers at the time. Looking back, they were pioneers. They were going, I'm so glad you've opened. I can get hold of as my colleague says, a left-handed doodah for ground source. I've been looking to get one of these, and now you're open, I can get one. Well, a lot of the time, we didn't have half the things that were on our website, but we knew we could get them, or we tried damn hard to find them. We just had to hook people in, obviously. And they'd come on and we'd be talking to people. So as a result, we'd speak to lots of homeowners who were, and I wouldn't advocate this now, they were installing it themselves with their local plumber, but they wanted to be involved. And we absolutely don't advocate that now. But at the time, it was, we were learning. So we'd get a lot of homeowners ring. That was nothing unusual. Anyway, we were getting a call from I think it was about 2007 time. We were getting lots of calls from a Mr. Hamilton's secretary, and they'd come on, and this lady would be very polite, say, "Can I put you through to Mr. Hamilton?" We're like, "Yeah." The phone hadn't rung for 3 hours, so yeah, put him through. We're chatting away, and he'd come on and say, "Hi, it's Tony. Are you all right?" "Yeah, I'm all right." Yeah, and we'd be chatting away about what he needs, and we're sending these things out. That went on for about 12, 18 months, and never thought anything of it. And then about 2 years later, we got a call from an installer saying, "Right, I need some bits for some maintenance at this house." And I was like, "All right, yeah, where are you working?" He says, "Well, I'm down at Lewis Hamilton's dad's." And I was like, "Oh, what's the address?" I'll put the address in our computer. And it was like, when you get those moments, you think, "Oh my God, yeah." We had no idea who it was. He used to ring up personally and order the bits for it, and he was such a nice gentleman. He never said who he was. He never said what it was about. We never asked. And it was just like I feel really silly saying it now, but at the time, we were just so grateful for his business.
Yeah, that's a testimony that should still be on the website if it's not, to be fair.
But I mean, we've since supplied quite a few sort of household names and brands, which I wouldn't go into, but it's interesting. There's quite a lot of what I'd call big A-lister stars who are very passionate about the environment, who do put their money where their mouth is, in fairness to them, and then good for them, really. Yeah. I think people do care in the main, and we all get sick of people preaching online and telling us not to do this and not to do that. But it's nice when people are doing it under the radar, and we see that sometimes, so it's good.
No virtual signaling, yeah. And you know what I love about those stories as well? Obviously, I can resonate with them, but it's making sure that people enjoy that journey. People enjoy the journey of when you're 2 strong, 3 strong, 5 strong, and these little tips to they what make your business, and they what make your culture, and do you know what I mean? Keeps you grounded, keeps you humble, and you've got to do what you can do just to earn living to get to when you start. And that is it doesn't feel at the time, looking back, they're the fun bits, aren't they?
They are. I think although it's very stressful, and I mean nothing prepares you for giving up your day job and getting yourself. You mentioned credit cards. I mean, one of the best bits of advice I was given when I was going around my customers at the time before I'd left my job, and I was lucky because I met a lot of entrepreneurs who set their own businesses up, and I was their account manager, and I did give them a lot of weight when they gave me advice. I've always liked listening to people's advice who have done that journey. I've got a lot of respect for people who've done it, who went before me. And I listened to a lot of what the things they said, but one of the guys was very sort of adamant. I was like quite resistant at the time. I was like, no, I don't like credit cards. I don't want to get a credit. No, listen to me, Tim. He says, get yourself a credit card, plural, and you'll need them. I was like, I won't. You will. Anyway, of course he was right. And yeah, you need to manage your household finance when you're not got any money coming in. And then at the time, it was like, God, he was so right. Yeah. But yeah, you learn a lot. And I think it's a shame that some of it's lost because you're so stressed and driven to get the business to be successful. You don't enjoy enough of that journey at the time. Mm-hmm. Looking back, yes, there was a lot of stress and there was a lot of pain, but also there was a lot of things that you can never repeat again, and they were kind of moments in your life you'll never have again. So it's good to try and enjoy it sometimes. You're right, Mark.
Completely agree, mate. Right, I've got some quick fire questions to end. You might not have seen. Who's the best manager you ever had and why?
That I've ever had, that I've worked for?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if he's alive or gone. I hope he's alive. I did bump into him about 10 years ago locally, but I worked for a polymer company when I was a teenager, and he was very old school. His name was Keith, and he couldn't have been more diametrically opposed to me as a fresh out of school kid. And he'd been in sort of industrial sales for all his working life, and he gave me a lot of good grounding in an export sales role at the time. And I was straight out of school, clueless. But yeah, he sort of imparted wisdom in a way that I didn't appreciate at the time.
Yeah.
And he would be my standout manager, I would say.
Nice. Biggest influence from either business, entertainment, or sporting world? Anyone you've ever taken any influence or motivation from?
Yeah, we've all got different people, haven't we? I mean, this is a strange one, you might say. I'll tell you, I admired a lot George Michael, because particularly since he's died, I was reading something about how much he did for good, having achieved, phenomenal success. And I really respect the fact that he did so much out of the limelight and out of the, below the radar, and no gain for him other than the sheer joy of passing that success on to people who are less fortunate. I really admire him for that. I mean, I was like a lot of people. I like some of his music, not all of his music, but some of his music. But I just think as a guy, as a person, I think he was a really good person. Flawed like everybody else, but just a really good. It's too easy to get that. Well, it's not easy to get that phenomenal success that he got, but to do something worthwhile at the end of it or during it is just so admirable in my opinion. But yeah, business leader wise, I think you could take many people in the UK that you admire, but I don't think I have one person that I hang my hat on. I think as you get older, what you do find, probably disappointingly, is that a lot of your heroes have flaws that you really don't like. Yeah. And often the most incredible people who've, cometh the hour, cometh the man, or cometh the woman, they're actually very flawed when you look beneath the surface. And that's kind of disappointing when you're older.
Flawed and sometimes bitterly unhappy in their life. And
absolutely. That's a very good point.
Yeah, it's a realization. I completely agree.
What drove them was a very strong thing that also made them quite miserable. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. 3 things or words that make up a good leader. What do you say?
That's a good one. 3 things or 3 words. Drive, imagination, and relentlessness.
Nice. Yeah, so we like the imagination one's a great one, that as well. Best book or audio book, podcast that you've ever read, listened to, anything that you'd recommend?
Oh, that's a good question, isn't it? Best book. One book I've enjoyed just for the sheer fun of it was Round Island with a Fridge. It's the
All right.
basic tenet of the book. It's a long time since I've read it, but it was basically a guy that took a fridge, literally a fridge, round Ireland and saw how far he could get round traveling with a fridge. I
Nice.
found it a highly entertaining book.
Yeah. I like that. Love it. Excellent stuff. And just for the business now, look, I know we haven't had a chance to really touch on it, but I know it's been a very exciting time. You've got an acquisition, there's loads of stuff happening. What are the sort of plans for the business and you moving forward next sort of couple of years? I imagine you're just at a stage where it's getting very, very busy. I know how exciting the plans are. So tell us a sneak peek of what you can.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing from the business perspective, since we were acquired in August 21 by the Anibi Group, ultimately through the Enertech Group, there's been a massive change in the ambition. It's took it onto a new level, and obviously we're involved with um, a lot more conversations in Sweden, and we've got a lot more partners involved now. So a lot of changes in terms of the scaling up. We like every other brand want to capitalise on the huge explosion in the UK. So we're taking on a lot more sites, buildings, people, investment in the offering to our customer base, and we're having to go up not a gear but 10 gears, and we're in a very, very aggressive, focused market. I think the thing that's changed beyond all recognition for me is seeing it in the early days where you could count on your hand the amount of brands that were even interested, whereas now we're into the hundreds, if not thousands, of brands that want to be part of this huge opportunity in the UK, for example. And it's took competition onto a stratospheric level. It really has, and there is nowhere for the meek and mild left now. It really is a case of you have to get it right. You have to be getting things right now, or you will be left behind. And that's something that there's no getting away from. No matter how big you are, how small you are, if you are not at least as good as, if not better than the competition around you on a number of levels, you will be left behind because the competition is phenomenal.
Love that. Excellent. Look, this has been a real pleasure, Tim. I've enjoyed it. I knew I would do. I had the pleasure of sharing the podcast stage with you previously with Teesside University.
Likewise, Mark.
And this has been good fun. I knew it would be. Look, in terms of for people listening, there's so much to have taken from this. I think the people take a lot from you. And you know, we talk about humility and you're obviously very humble, but you're a leader where people
Right to be.
would enjoy working for, and the culture, you can see that trickles through right down to the business, which is amazing. But you nailed it before as well, that we are at such a pivotal time in history in terms of the
Yeah.
movement making now. I think hopefully people just listening to this will have got some good tips and advice of what they can do, both in the business and both at home, because it's never been more important. And like you mentioned, why not move on something where you've got grants, because those grants aren't going to be here forever. So I think it's a great stage, isn't it? Definitely.
Absolutely. I think just to finally say there that not just ourselves, there's a whole industry out there that's wanting to help, but there's never been as much support, financial and knowledge wise, as there is now. So whilst the need for change has never been bigger, there's never been as much help as there is now. So it's a great time, whether you're a business or a homeowner, to delve deeper really, and there's lots of help available.
Yeah, 100%. So thanks, Tim. That was great.
Pleasure.